Are you ready for adventure, for danger, for death?
Can you repeat the question?
Just get on with it!
Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick. Now we're getting into the finale of What If Daryl Died Instead of Merle. Before we get into that, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new or just haven't subscribed, because it will help make the channel bigger, better, and you'll get more awesome stories like you've seen and are seeing right now. And once you guys get that all out of the way and that's all good, let's get into the finale of this here story. Now, Andrea has just left the islands, the Bloodsworth Islands, where Merle has gone to find Beta alone after seeing his mask on the boat. Andrea returns to the communities to spread the word of Merle going out on his own, and she is now going to travail back to the communities herself. But it's not going to be that easy for her. Of course it wouldn't be. What would The Walking Dead be if she just somehow made it back without problem? Literally. On her way, she runs across the house with the Ferals. But with this Andrea, it literally is no contest. It's just like pretty much any of the threats they came across so far. But while she continues on, she is suddenly sneak attack shot straight in her arm by none other than Montano, the First Reaper, which leads into a fight between Andrea and Montano. But it's not as one-sided as you might think, especially even if it's Andrea alone and the Reapers and everything like that. With her double-sided knife and her machine pistol, Andrea, especially with all her training for over 7 years, is able to actually overtake the fight in more aspects than one. Still getting injured, obviously, because she got shot, but not really a problem overall, until Montano pulls the pin on his grenade. But Andrea manages to backflip out of the way of the explosion in a very acrobatic way. But she now knows that there has to be more of this guy nearby, and she just continues to travail on, looking all around her, waiting for something else to happen. But eventually, she does find something. Meridian. Andrea has stumbled across the home of the Wardens, which has now been overtaken by the Reapers. And she has no idea what's in store for her. Meanwhile, just because the Whisperers are not a threat anymore and they were dealt with far sooner, doesn't mean we still don't have at least a little bit of Season 10 territory for the groups back at the communities to deal with. Like Maze. Gabriel and Aaron would still go out, but Rick this time is actually going to meet Maze face to face because of circumstances and everything. So because of Rick and the situation and how it would go with him, Maze, I feel, would actually live, which is not the first time I've done that. But Maze, brother, any story, I'm literally going to tell you, there's nothing I can do to save him. Now we're getting into Season 11 territory. Little kind of switcheroo, but hey, I have to include every aspect. Now, Andrea has stumbled across this place, Meridian, and doesn't know what to think of it. But all she can think is that there has to be more of that guy who she just came across, and she doesn't know if she really wants to go there. But then, the Wardens see her from a distance of where they're at, and looking for help, and they come across her and approach her. Andrea wants to know who they are, but Cole says that they are not Andrea's enemy, and that right there is their home. And they introduce themselves as the Wardens, and Cole introduces himself and explain a little bit more. And Andrea introduces herself and says she's on her way back to her own community, and explains a little bit about her and like what's going on there. Not too much about Merle, there's really no need. But then she wants to know more about these Reapers and this home they got here. And then Duncan would come up and explain more. That is their home that was taken from them by the Reapers and their lead man, Pope. And they tried to fight, but they lost many of their own. This group that Andrea sees here, they were lucky to have come across Andrea for help, because they had nowhere else to turn to. But then they saw Andrea, and they know that she must have come across one of them, because they noticed that one of the Reapers that was chasing them and that they were in contact with ain't around no more. So Andrea must have dealt with that particular threat. And Andrea says that if that's their home and they want to get it back, she'll help them. And as much as she would want to get extra help for this, she feels that with the group that they have here, plus her own expertise in fighting at least one of them, they can do this, but they have to do it smart. If they can go into a side entrance and take them all out single-handedly, sneakily, then it will be a cinch getting Meridian back. And that's what they proceed to do. But one of the Reapers and Cheetah sees them. And once Pope is informed, he is quite agitated and proceeds to talk with Leah and several Reapers about getting all the Reapers together to deal with it. But Anchita wants a better explanation of, what do you mean deal with them? Like, how do you want us to go about this? Specifically, Pope says that should be obvious. We already showed these people the wrath of God. Well, now they just went into the lion's den. Now they are asking to have the full force of God exacted upon them. And he yells at the Reapers to engage and get them out. Andrea says for all of them to be careful, because like she even said, if they're going to do this with just them, with her at it, they gotta do it smart, sneakily, and be on their guard if they want this home back. But no sooner does she say this when Cole begins to turn around a corner in front of the group and then gets his throat slashed by Nicole's, the first Reaper, who then proceeds to go ahead and attack. But Andrea, in quick fashion, with her machine pistol and her dual-wielding knife, takes out the likes of Nicole's with pretty much little to no resistance. Because Nicole's more or less, it's right after he killed Cole, so it was like spur in the moment. And then Michael Turner tries to take a stab at Duncan, who is off guard, but Elijah manages to save him and take out Michael. So it's sort of like a Maggie Negan moment in the regards of killing Michael. Agatha says that they managed to get lucky with those two, and Montanio, but she agrees with Andrea. They need to be more so on their guard now more than ever. They just lost Cole. So, yeah. Stealth and surprise is their only way of doing this. They can't have it used against them. And Andrea says, truer words have never been spoken, and the Wardens should almost be glad that she appeared, because now they just got themselves in a fight they can't get out of. Next up is Bossy, who was thrown in the fire, but Andrea takes him out in quick fashion by front flipping straight in front of him and then stabbing a pitchfork straight into his throat. So, very quick fashion with him, but we can only assume that Bossy was a weak Reaper even if we didn't see much of him from how he was killed. Next up is Paul Wells, who takes surprise initiative and takes out Agatha. But then he gets taken out straight after at least a little bit of struggle, by Sadiq throwing one of his weapons and Andrea taking initiative and stabbing Paul Wells in the neck. So, tag team effort between the two of them. Carver now goes to Pope, seeing and hearing about from other Reapers and just what's going on. that they just lost 4 of their own. And Pope is enraged. Unlike the fact in the original where there were dozens of people from like our main cast and the wardens, there are just a few people here, not even 10. So Pope is angry and says, if they don't take initiative, the wrath of God will come for them next. So he just gets angrier at them and tells his men to just don't let up and kill them. So Powell, along with Anshita, engage, and Duncan is killed next. But then Andrea, in a very quick fashion, takes out the likes of Powell, or however you want to say his name, and Elijah takes out the likes of Anshita. So, 2 more Reapers out of the way. And now Andrea is like, things are getting bad now. This is not only a fight to get this place back from these Reapers now. This is a fight for their very survival. So, with only Andrea and Elijah left, she tells him that now almost stealth and sneakiness is going to have to be induced up to 1,000%. Because if they don't, it doesn't even matter if they get the home back. What they need to do is just kill these people. That's it. And get whatever is here. The home is almost worth nothing to them at this point, with just the 2 of them. Then, when they get to the next room, they know that they're about to be engaged at this point. So Andrea devises a plan. From the side wall where there's an entrance or an exit, Andrea aims her gun, takes the shot, the bullet ricochets off the wall, and hits Deaver square in the head without him even realizing what's going on. So this was literally sort of like a John Wick move from Andrea. And then she proceeds to take her sniper and shoot and kill Austin at the first opportunity before he can even make an assault. And Elijah would take out the likes of Fisher, who would give some trouble, I feel, to Elijah, which Andrea would be more than capable of helping him with, throwing a grenade and thus ending half of the Reapers already, with now just the 2 of them. And Mancia, the priest Reaper, is noticing that their ranks are looking just a teensy little bit low, and tells Pope that if they keep losing men like this, even if it's just 2 people at this point, they're gonna have to hunker down or think of some kind of evacuation plan or like the Hiawatha or something, because they're not really making a winning case right now, even killing a few of them. In the next room, Jensen is taken out by the likes of Andrea in quick fashion, being like a Gabriel swap out. But then Boone and Washington both surround Elijah and Andrea. And now it's almost like they have the upper hand at this point. But Andrea just smirks because they're not the ones who have the upper hand, she tells them. And Elijah, even though they're surrounded with weapons at them, throws both of his piercing axe, sort of whatever you want to call those weapons, because I honestly never knew what the name was, at both Boone and Washington, which I'm sure they would get out of the way of. But Andrea, in quick fashion, side flips and uses her gun to take out both of them in the blink of an eye after they avoid the attacks. So it was sort of like a tag team effort, which they just got very lucky with. And now Mancy is definitely like, they need to think of something like to get out of here. But Leah and Carver say that that will absolutely not be necessary, because even though they've lost pretty much all of their own at this point, the 2 of them will make sure that Pope's God vision and the Reaper cause stays alive. When they engage, Carver takes on Elijah, and considering the fact that Elijah could not do any sort of thing to Carver, he can't do it here, even when he was teamed up with Maggie and Negan, while Andrea and Leah square off. And it would be like Maggie and Leah, honestly, except that with this Andrea in this story, it's a standstill. Literally, they're so evenly matched. Because, yes, with this story and how it's gone, if I haven't made it completely abundantly clear, Andrea is Reaper level. And, yeah, I know that might shock a lot of you to hear at this point, but, yeah, it's just how it would be with how Andrea and everyone has been in the story. But then she sees Elijah struggling with the likes of Carver, barely doing anything, and Carver barely breaking a sweat, and deducing that this guy Carver must be this Reaper group's best fighter, and she's got to think of something fast, even if she's got her own problem right now, because she's barely fighting this Leah girl now to a standstill. So she thinks of a very quick, awesome maneuver. She takes a smoke grenade and throws it straight into Carver's eyes while he's off guard. And this would be like a solar flare straight to the face. So just imagine that in like this kind of world. Now Elijah takes initiative to fight off Carver the best he can while he's blinded, which would be a minute. Leah proceeds to try and engage Andrea again, who gains her morale and feels a new sense of strength in her, rushes forward, trips Leah, and then completely and utterly goes berserk with her machine pistol, firing it off 300 billion times, however you want to freaking say it, until Leah's face looks like a freaking bloody deep dished pizza. So, yeah, Leah gets a bloody death in this story. Carver now looks over and sees that he's pretty much the only one left after regaining his sight, because once again, smoke grenade in the eye is not exactly gonna make you feel freaking good with your eyesight. But Elijah has gained some ground with Carver and says that not to worry about Andrea or his friend Leah, because he's got him to deal with. Carver still remains unconvinced even after all this that he's losing. But that is until Elijah just has had enough. Throws both of his pincers, but Carver manages to dodge. But then Andrea throws not one, not two, but 3 shotgun bullets into the mix and promptly ends Carver right then and there. So it's like an Elijah and Negan thing, how they teamed up on Negan in that, or Carver in that moment, except this time it's with Andrea. And Andrea asks, "Is that it? Are we done?" But Elijah says, "Unfortunately, not yet." But he does thank Andrea for getting him at least this far and avenging his sister. And Andrea says no problem to it. She wants to be able to help out communities and people, but she wants to know more about who's left. And Elijah, to the best of his knowledge, says that there has to be at least 2 left. A priest and the leader himself. And Andrea says if that's all that's left, and they still got at least enough strength to mount a good attack, then it will be no problem at all teaching these last 2 who's boss. And then, when they get into the next room, Andrea pretty much on all cylinders just holsters her gun straight whenever they get into the room and is just ready to end it right then and there. But Pope and Mencia being there, being discovered, and Pope seeing all of his children pretty much dead, just enragingly tries to attack Andrea with his god sense and telling her how she should be ashamed and all this mumbo jumbo, but Andrea is completely and utterly not interested and shoots Pope to the bloody ground. Mencia, trying to talk his way out of it or run away, is not going to deter the likes of Elijah, who just straight up massacres him. So with that, the Reapers are officially freaking dealt with. What about the Hawacha, though? It wasn't even used in this story. Well, because of how Andrea decided that the wardens and herself should go in, it really is just nothing at this point. It's just a relic that's now part of this community that will no longer be used. So Andrea and Elijah take what's in it, all of what they can, supplies, food, everything, and proceed to make their ways back to where Andrea says the communities are, where she came from. Meanwhile, Eugene, Milton, Jesus, Abraham, and Sasha come across Princess, and they go to the train yard for the Commonwealth section. Soon enough, they get surrounded by the Commonwealth soldiers, but Jesus ultimately takes them down in a fell swoop to the ground. With him there, everything changes. And Jesus says to them that they're not here to fight. They're here on the behalf of Eugene, who came and wanted to meet out with who he believed was not only a nice person, but hopefully a nice community. And they just want to talk peacefully. But the Commonwealth soldiers aren't deterred, because we all know how jerky they were when we first met them, especially even going onwards past that. But Abraham and Sasha proceed to arm up their guns, feeling some stemmed up confidence from seeing Jesus gain upper ground, as he did when he met Rick and Daryl for the first time in canon. But even with this, the Commonwealth soldiers are still not deterred. But then Milton speaks up, him being there and having a bigger influence than he did when they met in my Sophia story. He says to the Commonwealth, what is the point of being a community and talking with outsiders and branching themselves out if they're just going to be hostile and negative and completely out of there towards others? It makes them no better than walkers. And Eugene would be very against Milton talking to them like this because how he wanted to meet Stephanie and everything. But he does admit talking them down with words instead of guns is honestly a much better approach. And Jesus would be on the side of this more and said that he did not mean to attack them, but they honestly gave him no choice. They are here on the better side of terms, and they do not wish to engage. They wish to speak to the person in charge, talk to the person Eugene met on the radio, and sort this out properly. So the Commonwealth soldiers finally listen and radio to Lance. But they do say that while they can't permit them to meet their leaders directly, they still have to go through the processing and everything on the regulations of the Commonwealth. But they're not going to be how they were just now, and they will promise them that they will remain them unharmed, they can stay together, and they can go about this good, as long as they agree to just all stop, basically. Everyone is happy. And Abraham and Jesus are glad to see that things are starting to work out. And once Mercer's brought into the mix, Abraham would definitely recognize him as one of the main higher-ups, because he was a general himself. And I've had Abraham and Mercer be involved together in a great many stories. So, of course, they would be here. And then we get to the processing section, which, besides Abraham, Sasha, and Jesus and Milton being there, would go exactly the same. Then we go to Eugene punching Sebastian, which would be even more epic here because Abraham is around. And I would very much have loved to see how proud Abraham would be of Eugene in that moment. When Lance is brought into the mix and hears about this and sees it, he demands to know more about the communities and where they are and stuff like that. Basically like how he was before. But Abraham and Sasha are now feeling more skeptical, and Jesus is getting in the mix too because of Sebastian and just Lance's attitude towards the whole thing. But Lance insists and says that really explains a little bit about Sebastian and everything and insists on the whole communities thing. But Abraham specifically wants confirmation that if they were to divulge said information now, especially with the whole Sebastian incident, that their communities would remain safe. But Lance says, look at how they've treated them. If they were going to do anything to their communities or anything like that, they would have done it already, especially to them. This he thinks was just a big misunderstanding. So the 5 of them decide why the frick not, and the Commonwealth soon arrives at the communities. But also before then, Elijah and Andrea made their ways back first. Andrea being injured, so as Elijah, but alive. Then Rick and Michonne find out about what happened. They find out about Merle going after Beta, the Reapers, and now the Commonwealth is here too. They decide not to talk about or engage the prospect of Merle just yet. And they honestly understand why he did it and proceed to touch upon it further after they deal with what's going on here now, and are just frankly glad to see at least Andrea has come back and she's alive. But as for the Commonwealth, with Pamela, Lance, and the whole ordeal with Sebastian and everything like that, it's really no contest like I've done in multitudes of stories. The Commonwealth is just nothing. With Rick, Abraham, Carol, Michonne, and so many higher-ups and so many people, the Commonwealth would be next to nothing in terms of a threat. And Rick would see to this, especially one-handed. It would be like a comic aspect, but he doesn't die. It's a much different Rick and story. But in the end, he would make a speech to everyone once the Commonwealth is dealt with, and talk about more things that he felt should have been brought up sooner, and just since now he's pretty much the one in charge. He would proceed to bring up to everyone about Merle and where he is, and how he went after Beta, who is still alive, and how they're not going to go after him. And he would explain this further by talking about someone who he feels, now that the Commonwealth has become part of the communities and everything, deserves the recognition that he never got. Daryl Dixon. Rick remembers Daryl after all this time, the kind of person that he was, and he looks down while making this speech. Rick says that, honestly, Daryl Dixon is one of the few people who's inspired him to push this far as a leader, and what pushed him to work with his brother Merle as much as he did. He remembers who Daryl was, how he changed from when he first met him, and how he meant so much, especially at the time, to the group and everyone. He remembers how he helped out Glenn, so many others, how he tried looking for Sophia, and how he helped out in every given situation, even if he was reckless at times, and how he even opted to help Mercy kill Dale. But then, and Rick cries now while he's saying this, then he remembers when everything changed, the day that Daryl Dixon was taken from them. Merle's own flesh and blood brother taken by the governor, the one whose town Woodbury Merle forged into something amazing over 7 years, and it was all because of one man who took one person out of this world from them. But Rick says it honestly worked out. Daryl Dixon's sacrifice made something great come out of the world. Merle Dixon's redemption. And Rick says to everyone he would have never believed in a million years that the man that he handcuffed onto the roof in Atlanta and made him chop off his own hand, and then him, ironically, years later, do the same thing, would become one of the greatest people that he would have ever come across. And Rick never gave him the recollection or true admiration that he feels for him and that he should have said. And says, they're not going to go after Merle for Beta. They're not going to give Beta or whatever else out there more to kill They don't know what's out there. They don't know what to expect. Instead, they're going to forge and continue to forge on what Merle has built, what Daryl helped them alongside until Woodbury build. And they're going to honor not only Daryl Dixon for Merle's case, but they're going to honor the fact that Merle Dixon will return to them with Beta's whole body and life off of their minds, and that they will forge the world that Merle helped them complete, and they will support him and everyone who has made what's happened happen. And everyone would cheer for Rick and for Merle, and last but certainly not least, Daryl Dixon, whose memory never faded from anyone's minds. So, in the end, Rick would make a monumental speech. It would captivate Merle's character development immensely, and the greatness that he would do not only as a better character himself, but how many characters would live because of it. Daryl's sacrifice instead of Merle's means that Merle would take an active role better than Daryl ever could. Not to say that Daryl didn't do good. Of course he did. And he still continues to today to look for Rick. But Merle's ultimate survival instead of Daryl, reversing the two, it ultimately meant that the governor was stopped early. It means that Woodbury remained active until the Whisperers were a freaking threat. And it means that him being around, even if Daryl was, means he would do leagues more of special with his character. And for the ending, after Rick would make this monumental speech, and everybody would honor, whether Merle comes back alive or dead, they would honor him in their hearts for all that he had ever done for them. Old people like Herschel, Reg, Gregory, many of them would sadly live until the end, but pass. Living until the end, honestly something that I did not expect to do, but hey, they would actually get to see their lives fulfilled and actually get somewhere and be happy. Many relationships would found even better. Merle and Andrea's kid, Andrea would hold towards her heart forever. And as he or she, I forget who really I made the kid, pretty sure I made it a he as Daryl Jr., but she would hold her child with her heart forever. Whether Merle comes back or not, she would know that as long as their kid remains around, that she would always have a part of Merle Dixon with her. A man who originally called her bad names and a rug muncher actually turned up something in her life. And Michonne, she would honor him based off of the jerk that she thought he was. Two people who tried to kill each other turned into the bestest of friends in the end. And heck, if they had gotten together, the story might have been drastically different. Heck, we might even have Michonne here going after Merle like, she was going after Rick and the ones who live. But I ain't to that part yet. As for other relationships, Carl and Mika, Henry and Lydia, and many more, they would continue to found on to many people living on. And it would ultimately be happier. Sure, I could have made a huge bunch of them go after and pursue Merle, but that would take away from the growth that Merle has demonstrated. Being able to cross the line where ultimately, Daryl in many cases couldn't, and show what he has truly been alive for. True, there could have been more in-depth moments, and maybe more violence or like dramatic moments, but I feel that the way the story capsulated, especially around parts that didn't even include Merle, I felt that the overall impact, be it short, much shorter than my Dale story, or long, it just showed you people that Merle Dixon was definitely capable of change. And as we know of Negan and several others, every person, be they fictional, real life, or whatever, they have the opportunity and time for change. We all should take a lesson out of that. And the communities would continue to thrive. Every community that didn't make it in the original would thrive beyond completion with how much Merle had the influence on them. And Rick being around, he would become the true leader along with Abraham, Mercer, Andrea, and Michonne, leading all the communities into a better growth than ever before. They would thrive to ultimate completion and actually be way, way better than any community ever did before. And they would begin to reshape the world in their favor. While they're doing that, we have Merle Dixon tracking down Beta, who's had a very, very rough time getting used to a certain little group that we're getting introduced to in real life right now. And that's where the Merle and Beta spinoff, Dixon's Whispers, Merle versus Beta, comes into play. Because this story isn't over. Because for those of you who didn't get the community posts and Discord messages, I am finally including the spin-offs into my Walking Dead videos. Finally, I have found a project and have enough spin-off material at my disposal to work with the spin-offs finally. And this one is going to cover Merle pursuing Beta, not knowing that he was brought to the CRM against his will, unmasked and all. We're going to find out a lot about Beta, mainly me putting stuff in, and you guys, with the help of GMV and other people, are going to see a version of The Walking Dead that you have never seen before. The pursuit of Beta and the ultimate test for Merle and Beta's characters. And so, we end the story of What If Daryl Died Instead of Merle. But the final chapter and the ultimate conclusion to the story will come very soon, within a few days. So until then, be sure to catch up on the series because it's been a decent heck of a ride, even if it wasn't as long. And until then, I hope you guys stay tuned because you're about to go on a heck of a ride. And I will see you then. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
Anyway, seriously, get out now. Get out. Get out.